Hi, my name is Tam. This is episode 2 of Creative Rights Who Owns What, a podcast series owned by Larry's Cafe, which is Larry's Culture, Art, Fashion, and Entertainment. This particular episode is kind of very timely for me. The name of the episode is Colonization of Ideas. So recently, people have been very emotional. Now, these emotions are not necessarily just one part of a spectrum, but like many parts of a spectrum. And you've been very emotional about the passing of a certain monarch. A lot of people have been discussing the fact that colonization generally of the world by the British Empire has been a very bad thing. Some people have defended it as a thing of its time. But regardless of where you are on the end on that debate, I'm going to be talking about the colonization of ideas and how not only our physical and tangible minerals have been colonized and used or appropriated for personal use or national use of the British. Not only has that happened, but our ideas have also been touched. Our intellectual property has also been tampered with. But then again, I'm not going to really focus on what has already happened. I'm going to focus on the idea of colonizing ideas and how you can walk around that, how you're probably colonizing an idea now, and how you can stop someone else from colonizing your own idea. So first of all, the idea of colonization basically means appropriating something for your own use, something that already existed. It doesn't necessarily mean creating from scratch. And we understand that when it comes to content for creatives, it's usually created by the person that owns it most of the time. So, but however, the law only recognizes owners. It does not necessarily recognize people that create it. Now, in theory, the law recognizes creators, but in practice, it's usually the person that can prove originality that the law actually recognizes. And proving originality is what we call putting a content or an idea in a fixed form. So originality is one thing, but you also have to prove it by putting it in a fixed form. So if, for instance, everybody in a room comes up with an idea to create a dance video about a particular song that just came out or was released, or better yet, imagine if everybody in a room comes up with the same idea, let's say in a classroom where the teacher says something funny and everybody comes up with an idea to use it as a song lyric that is going to probably be very catchy for maybe varieties night or socials night in school. And you might be wondering, who is the first person? How do you determine real originality? How do you determine who actually owns something, who created something first? Now, this is actually answered by who puts it in a fixed form first. So the law answers this question of who owns something or who is the original creator of something by saying who puts it in a fixed form first. Now, what exactly is this fixed form? This fixed form can be any thing that has a timestamp. So if you write it down and you can prove that you wrote it on a particular day, or you record it with your voice. Now, this issue of timestamp is very tricky because not every method of putting something in a fixed form has the timestamp. And unfortunately, the only way you can prove the time or prove real originality is proving that you came up with it first, especially when many people actually decide to put it in a fixed form. That's if everybody decides to write it down or record themselves. So that's where the issue of timestamp comes in. Now, if you colonize an idea, chances are you are the one that puts it in a fixed form first. It does not necessarily mean you were the first person that created it. So the idea of, colonization can be a very tricky thing, and it has caused many problems and many disputes among many creative people over time. Now, I'm going to mention something that is very close to what we know as the colonial times, and what we are familiar with the word colonization here in Nigeria. So when we think of colonization, a lot of people think back to the particular British governors that actually came and colonized us. One of such people is Mungo Park. Now, a lot of people claim that, or many history books claim that he was one that named River Niger, and his lady friend gave the name Nigeria. Now, it's possible to say, he didn't just name. A lot of people say he discovered River Niger. He didn't necessarily name it. He didn't just name it. But we can tell from history that these rivers did not appear like when he went there. Like we cannot claim that he was the first person to actually see that river himself. So we know people have lived along the river's banks for many years. We know that tribes have existed before he was born along those places. But we usually credit him as the person that discovered that river. Why? Because he was the person that gave it a name And he didn't just give it a name, he gave it a public name. Now I'm sure that every other person that lived along that riverbank had a name for the river, especially if it's people in different tribes with different languages. Everybody probably had a name, but he not only had a name for it, he documented it. And that's why we're coming back to the idea of putting something in a fixed form. So the moment you put an idea in a fixed form, you've colonized that idea. So when he decided to name the river and put it in public records that he was the person that named the river, that discovered the river, that moment he colonized the name of the river. He colonized the river basically. And it's the same thing we do when we have ideas. So I think if anything at all, this should be a call to action, that song you've written or you've thought about in your head, that story you've come up with, go and write it down. And it's not just enough to write it, but write it somewhere that has a timestamp. So for instance, if you wrote it on a piece of paper out of excitement, let's say the paper was very close to you, or you just typed it in your phone, please upload it to a cloud system or send it as an email to yourself. You probably have more than one email address, or you can send it to the email address of someone that you know personally, someone you don't mind disclosing it to. But better yet, just try and send your email to yourself. That's just safer. So once you've done that, you've put a timestamp on it, because if any dispute comes out in the future, you can say, hey, this is the day I created it. Now, let's double back to the Nigerian copyright law, which is the law of content in Nigeria. What it says is that your work has to be in a fixed form and it has to be original for you to be able to claim ownership, right? The system we run in Nigeria is actually more of a notification system. The copyright doesn't happen the day you get a certificate from the Nigerian Copyright Commission. No, it's the copyright is created the day you create that work, the day you put that work in a fixed form. So if something happens and you go to court and you can show proof that you created this work January 1, 2012, and the other person registers it, let's say January 20th, 2012. If you can prove that yours came first, then your claim is going to be much more stronger than somebody that has a certificate that came up on a later date. But then again, if the person can also claim that the person created it before you, which is long before the person registered it, then that's another story. But basically, the idea is you have to colonize your ideas properly. You need to take charge over them. If not, other people are going to take take over it basically. Now, the next thing I want to discuss is culture. Now, in Larry's Cafe is actually an abbreviation. It is culture, art, fashion, and entertainment. Now, the cultural aspect of it is what I'm going to discuss now, and it is about the fact that culture can be colonized as well. So elements of culture can be colonized as well. So if maybe you're like a particular group of people have a particular culture of wearing a particular color in a particular way on a particular day, ideally you would expect that should belong to them, right? But if it is not public knowledge that it belongs to them, if there's no way to prove that this belongs to them, it is possible for that idea or for that element of intellectual property to be colonized by somebody else. So it's very important. So if you have any culture in your place and you know that there's no public record of this culture, there is no video, there is no picture, even for instance, if it's not even popular news, especially among people of our generation, like if people don't know that this is our cultural heritage, then I'm sorry, like this is bad news, but somebody could colonize this thing very soon. And then tomorrow you can start shouting cultural appropriation up and down. But if you don't have any proof, then you've lost it, and it's going to be a very sad thing. So please be very conscious of that. Then in terms of cultural appropriation generally, there's actually Nigerian laws that govern it, and it's also back to this same law of content, which is the Copyright Act. Now, the Copyright Act only spells out laws to govern folk content. That's folklore and basically stories and dramas, dance, basically like very music, stories and things like that. Those are the kind of things that are covered. So other elements like let's say tattoos, maybe hairdressing styles and the rest, those things are not covered by the Copyright Act. So, but then again, I believe that in the coming years, we're going to have a more robust intellectual property law regime in Nigeria. So I'm still very open to that. I'm still very open-minded. I'm very hopeful and optimistic in that area. But right now, the law that governs intellectual property relating to our culture is very limited. So then again, what I would tell you is, be very conscious. Try and colonize it fast, because somebody else can come out and take it. Now, what the law says currently is that if you want to use any element of culture in a way that the culture, the particular people that own that culture don't usually use it, that's if you're going to use it outside its cultural context, or if you're going to use it for commercial reasons, you need to get the approval and the permission of the Nigerian Copyright Council. Yes. But it doesn't say anything about if you are an indigenous of the place or if you're an outsider. It doesn't say anything about those two things. However, it puts caveats in the sense that if you're using it, if it's fair use, if you're using it for educational purposes or a list of other requirements that it mentions in the Act, then you can use it. But there's a but. You must acknowledge and give credit to the particular community that it comes out from. However, in this podcast, what I'm going to focus on is the fact that if there is no public record of this particular culture, if there is no public record anywhere, or if it's not put in any fixed form, it is possible for someone to come and colonize it. And if the person is not only from another country, but most likely from another continent, it's going to pain you. And it's not only going to pain you, it's going to pain us. Because most times when people appropriate culture, it's usually for commercial reasons. And commercial reasons usually translate into economic advantages. And economic advantages equals to money. It's going to be very painful if someone uses my culture to make money and I don't benefit from it. Or worse off, I cannot take credit for that element of culture. I cannot have any pride in having it coming from my place. You get, it could even be tied to my identity. I don't know. You get, so I feel like it's very important. This is not even a feeling. This is very important. So I would say, this is what I would say to you. Definitely, if you have any element of culture from your hometown or anywhere, especially if you're an African, this is a good time to go and colonize it for yourself. Well, not for yourself, but colonize it for your people. Because the law does not recognize creators, it recognizes colonizers. So, and when I say colonizers, I'll explain it again in case you skipped to this part of the podcast episode. I'll explain it again. A colonizer is basically the person that appropriates it for their own use or for the use of the group in which they represent. So go put in a fixed form, prove your originality, prove that it's from you, put it in a fixed form. Even if you don't want to make money off it, at least let there be a record that it belongs to you or your people. So that when other people come and carry it, it's going to pay you. An example now is with the death of this monarch, a lot of people have been writing threads, they've been ranting, people are angry, and a lot of people have been affected directly by the British colonization of Africa and other aspects of other parts of the world. So it's very easy for them to like rant and everything, as opposed to other people that have been affected but only indirectly. But if somebody comes to colonize your culture tomorrow, this is no longer like the regular national colonization, and this is about ideas. If they come to colonize your cultural identity tomorrow, know that it's because you didn't do anything about it, especially if you've watched this video. So go and do something about it. You don't have to carry a full camera crew and make a documentary. You can actually go ahead to just carry your phone. Most like if you're watching this, chances that you actually have a mobile phone. Use the camera. Go and record it. If it's a festival, record the festival. Record the process of the festival. Record what exactly every single element of that festival, so that even if people are going to use it for commercial gain in the future, if they, for instance, get the approval of the Nigerian Copyright Council, you can still be able to claim credit. People can be able to say, yes, this is the community it came from. Your people can actually use it as a thing of pride. It could even be a tourist attraction. We don't know. But the main thing is that you don't want to find out how painful it will be. So do something about it. That's basically everything for Colonization of Ideas, which is episode 2 of Larry's Cafe's Creative Rights, Who Owns What. Peace.